FBI intelligence executive Josh School. Let's just get your initial thoughts about what we saw in Aurora, what we're hearing about in Massachusetts. We know that this is all across the country, but specifically in Aurora, why would the Aurora Police Department be reluctant to say this is a typical gang activity from Tren de Aragua?
Well, I think they're looking to substantiate proof in a law enforcement setting for a judicial proceeding. While you can highly suspect that it is gang from Venezuela, until you actually can prove it, they're going to be reluctant to put out a statement. Further, we don't know whether or not there is process underway to actually disrupt conspiracies, which would then be public in court documents.
I see. Okay.
So how bad do you think this is? I mean, obviously, we're waiting on confirmation of exact ties to the gang, but you look at that video and wow, is there something happening in that city, in that town? I mean, Aurora, just outside of Denver there, people are terrified about what they're seeing. I mean, they're ransacking the Target stores there. Businesses feel targeted. And I've worked the phones this week trying to get people to come on to talk about it. No one there wants to talk about it. Why? They fear they will be targeted by these gangs.
And gangs rely on that fear to keep communities quiet. I saw that Aurora's creating a special task force. There's already task force and gang task forces that can be oriented with federal dollars towards these gangs and to disrupt them. This is hugely concerning when you see that the level of violence and intimidation that's going on. And if law enforcement writ large, which will be required to disrupt this gang, doesn't focus on them, they're going to continue to grow.
There was a chance for the vice presidential nominee on the Republican side, J.D. Vance, to hit the Democrats nominee, Kamala Harris, on this. Watch here.
Kamala Harris let in people who shouldn't be in this country to begin with. Kamala Harris opened the border, suspended deportations on day one, and stopped Donald Trump's Remain in Mexico policy. When Donald Trump is president, we're going to re-implement deportations, re-implement Remain in Mexico, and tell people they got to go back where they came from and come through the proper channels.
We know from polling that the economy is the #1 issue, but immigration is right below it. And as from your experience looking across the nation, Colorado is not the only place dealing with this. What are you hearing from other entities?
Well, other entities, you're seeing violence we saw in New York, Louisiana, Miami. The most recent reporting has sex trafficking rings going all the way through Virginia and other states. So again, criminals are going to exploit the border. In order to exploit the border, they have to have relationships with Mexican cartels, which are very powerful. Venezuelan gangs operating in the United States with relationships with the Mexican cartels is very concerning for U.S. law enforcement. And when they go into these smaller towns, Aurora is a relatively large, but they're not a major metropolitan city like New York. There has to be federal resources directed in order to disrupt this and dismantle this gang before it continues to grow in power.
You know, with your experience with working with gangs and fighting against them, you look at what's happening there in Denver, and reportedly, this gang has green-lighted their members to attack police. I mean, the worst kind of criminal is one who has no fear of repercussions, no fear of breaking the law, and no fear of police even confronting them. How do you fight this when you're law enforcement? How do you show up and take care of these guys?
Well, first of all, you work in a joint environment where you have state, local, and federal law enforcement working together. You're aware of the threat, so you take huge precautions. But it is concerning that an armed gang would think that they could operate the same way in our country that they did in other countries, where we have reporting of them killing law enforcement that weren't cooperating with the gang. The way you do this is you create the task force, and you operate with Safe Streets task forces to dismantle at the highest level, and that transcends all the way from the start and how they're